Hello, welcome to my latest video. It's a little bit different, it's a lot longer. That's because the time lapse is slower and I've got lots of periods of real time in there where I mention how I'm doing the various techniques. If this isn't for you and you just want to see the picture develop at a faster speed like normal, I will be producing another version in a day or two and I'll have a link when it's available. So see what you think of this new format and hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you. Bye. I've started by putting a cross on the board, which is exactly in the middle. Same thing on the reference photo. It's kind of like the crudest grid method you've ever seen. It was just helped to get the main elements in the right place. The drawing is going to be very simple, as soon as you put paint on you tend to obliterate the drawing lines, so it's not worth going into any kind of real detail. You just want to mark the position of the main objects. Now after the very simplified drawing, it's onto the blocking stage, and this is where you take the main midtones of the reference image and just place them down into crude shapes, roughly where everything is. This stage will eventually get obliterated by the final painting, and it's just kind of a slightly better version of the drawing. Really, it helps with you adjusting the colours, something a drawing can't do. Plus, one benefit is when you do the final painting or the final details, if there's a small bit you've missed out, instead of the white of the board shining through like a sore thumb, you've got a colour that's pretty close to what it should be anyway, so you don't notice. Now I'm starting the painting for real, and starting from background to foreground. So obviously the furthest back is the sky, and because the painting is quite complicated, I'm going to just do a very simple sky, and that's a graduation from a light blue to an even lighter blue. So what I've got here is a French ultramarine, the tiniest amount of alizarin crimson just to warm it up slightly, and a lot of titanium white. And as I come down the sky, I keep adding titanium white to lighten it. You can see I'm going over and over the paint here to make sure it's lovely and smooth. I'm not being too careful about going over the foliage of the trees. This paint, this thin layer of paint is a little bit transparent, so if you go over the stuff you can still see where things are. This is the beauty of oils, is they blend really nicely. Right, now we're going to start on the first of the trees. Always starting furthest away first. So I'm on this line of trees way in the distance, and because they're quite a long way away, they're very shifted towards the blue. The blue being French ultramarine with a tiny bit of cadmium yellow pale in there just to push it towards green a little. And to make it paler, a good healthy dose of titanium white as well. I'm using a flat brush here, a number 8, I think. Yes, a number 8. If you can see closely, I'm not sure if you can really see this, but I'm only using the very corner of the brush as a kind of little point, and I'm taking note of the patterns the leaves make around the perimeter. Looking closely at the reference photo, although not slavishly following it, just giving the impression of it. Because these trees are off in the distance, I'm only going to do the mid-tone and a little bit of a highlight. The shadows will be lost. Now I've basically got a solid silhouette of these background trees, I'm going to put some detail in there using Rosemary & Co.'s Tree and Texture Series 32. This is a very stiff, sort of wild brush that's really good at introducing texture. Remembering all the time this is the background trees, so you mustn't have too much detail in there. I've added a little bit of yellow to the mix to green it up slightly and make it lighter, just to give a hint of some highlights. Just short little stabby motions, and letting the brush do all the work. Just finishing up there with the number 8 flat brush again. Much like the background trees, I'm going to start on this slightly closer grouping with the number 8 flat brush and define the edge. And now back to the tree and texture brush to put some of the shadows in. I've now got a lighter, more yellow colour to pick out some of the mid-tones to highlights, but not the strongest highlights. And now I'm going even more yellow and even lighter to pick out some of the stronger highlights. And now I've started trees and bushes that are closer to the viewer, so I'm going to use stronger colours, and here starting with the darkest areas, which means I'll be using a lot of French ultramarine and burnt umber, plus cadmium yellow pale to keep it towards the green. I'm now going to go through the colours, getting progressively lighter, and pick out the structure of these trees and bushes, keeping a close eye on the reference photo so you can try and replicate the shapes. Now I've got the midtones and highlights in, I can assess the shadows, and I've decided to go a little bit darker to increase the contrast, as these smaller trees and bushes are much closer to the viewer. And now all that's needed to finish off is the lightest, brightest highlights, just in a few spots here and there. Now it's time to make a start on the water, just the main background. The final ripples will be done when this pass has dried. Basically what I'm after here is a mirror image of what's above, but a bit more blurred, and the colours should be slightly darker and less contrast than what's it's reflecting. You must also keep in mind that where the object that's reflecting into the water is closer to the water, it's a little bit sharper. So right by where the waterline is, close to the edge, you get almost perfect reflections there. Not quite, but nearly. But further away, down at the bottom, which is closest to the viewer here, that will be very blurry. Right, while the first layer of the water dries, I'm just going to make a start on the little area on the far right. This area is the main focal area of the painting, as it's going to have some of the lightest parts in it. But I'm going to try and complete the lone tree in basically the same style as I've done so far, and then get a basic layer of the grass in that sunny area down, ready for a final pass later. Back on the water, I've decided the reflection of the far in the distance trees was far too dark, so I'm just toning it down a little bit. And once done that, the technique for doing the water is really quite straightforward. You pick the sky colours and just draw lots of little dashes, keeping an eye on the reference photo to to match where they are in real life, not being too much of a slave to it, but just get the impression of it. And then you also pick up the colour from the reflection areas of the trees, the darker areas, and put loads of those dashes across as well. So you get the sky dashes going across the reflection of the trees, and you get the tree reflection dashes going across the sky reflection area. And you just keep to that rule, and it seems to work out well and looks really realistic. For this large path area on the right, I'm going to cover it very quickly with a fan brush, picking up the colours as needed and just dabbing it down. And this will give quite a good texture, well, it's a good start to the texture of the area. It's just a baseline, and I'll let it dry before putting the sort of the fine little bit odd bits of fine detail which will help sell the idea. Now's a good time to start the big tree. I'm just going to choose the main colour and work out where the branches are going to go. Again, I'm not going to slavishly copy the photograph. I'm just going to give the impression and put the branches where I think they need to be. I'm probably going to do less than half the branches that are in the real tree. I think the real tree's just got too many. just taking the opportunity now to put some of the finer details on that background light patch of light with a number 2 rigger. Here I'm back out with the tree and texture brush and a very dark mix, and I'm just getting some texture in these final trees on the right. Plus I'll be doing the there's a line of longer grasses in the water's edge, and I'll be going over that as well. I'm just constantly looking at the reference photo to see where the darkest areas are. This is quite a thin mix of paint, so it dries almost immediately. The short grass of the path and the path itself have been done to very nearly a finished position with just the fan brush I used earlier. But to aid the realism, I'm going to use this rigger brush, pick out some colours and stripe in all the longer bits of grass. You just have to do this in strategic areas. You don't need to go mad and put millions of blades of grass in, just here and there, and it gives you the illusion of the whole path being covered in lots of little blades of grass. I've thinned the paint down quite a lot with white spirit so it flows beautifully off the brush. I'm putting in the darker blades of grass first, and then I'll slowly lighten and make more yellow the colour so as to pick out the highlights. You need to be a bit patient, as it doesn't look so good when you've just got the darker blades in there. The painting really comes to life once you put the highlights on. The leaves of the main tree are surprisingly easy. You mix up your three main colours, those being the darkest shadow areas, the midtones and the final highlights. Once these are mixed, you get the small rigger brush and just splodge the leaves on with little dabs, and it works quite well. The most important thing is the placement of the leaves. Not that they are going to follow the exact placement on your reference photo, but they must make the same sort of patterns. You've got to remember, leaves follow the lines of the branches, so don't just splodge them on at random. Think about how the branches would develop and put the leaves around where those branches would go. We haven't actually put all those branches, all those little fine sticks, they're not there, so you just have to pretend they're there and follow them. The final closest tree on the right is done in a very similar way to the main tree. It's just I've done this with a little bit quicker and a little bit less care, because I don't want this to be any kind of focal point, so I don't want people's eyes to rest on it. It's just something there to frame the rest of the painting. Here I've gone back to have another little go at the water. There was a sharp line I could keep seeing, which was annoying me, so I'm just picking up the colours and trying to break it up so it's not so obvious. Time to paint the cincture, so that must mean I've finished. If you managed to watch all of it, well done. It was quite a long one, this. I think this is the longest video I've ever done. If you'd like to see more, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and the various social media links. I've started putting in progress photos on Instagram, so if you want to see what's coming up next and how I'm getting on, please go and have a look at that. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video.